Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ruth David. I'm Deputy London Bureau Chief and a senior reporter at Bloomberg News. Many thanks to all of my panelists for waking up early in the morning to be part of this. I'm going to start by letting each of you introduce yourselves with your name and title, if we can go from you, Sheikh, and then I'll get right into questions.
All right, thank you, Ruth. Ali Al-Thani, I'm the CEO of the Investment Promotion Agency in Qatar.
Thank you for having us. It's a good pleasure to be here. Abdurrahman Al-Dhahiban, Managing Director of Google Cloud, Middle East, Turkey, and Africa.
Morning, Ruth and everyone. Maurizio Brusadelli, Mondelez International. Probably you know more Oreo, Cadbury, Milka, Toblerone biscuits. And I run Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa.
My name is Badr Al-Dafa. I am the Special Envoy for Climate Change and Sustainability, the State of Qatar.
Good morning. Ali Al-Shabibi, partner at KPMG, based here in Qatar. Nice to meet you.
Good morning, everyone. Oliver Ripley, CEO and co-founder of Habitas.
Okay, well, let me start with Your Excellency. The world is seeing more news about the importance of ESG than ever before. And yet, yesterday, somebody was talking about the statistic about how this is a record year, 2021, for power generation from coal globally. How can countries wean themselves off such fuels and to more sustainable energy generation?
I really did not get the question.
We're talking so much about energy being generated from coal. How
Yes.
do you get away from that and to more sustainable energy generation?
Okay.
How do you encourage that?
Yeah. 3 weeks ago, we were in Copenhagen celebrating 50 years of the first environmental conference that took place in Stockholm. It's called Stockholm Plus 50. The whole concentration was on, of course, with what's going on in Ukraine and the pressure on gas and the need of gas. How do you shift from coal to a cleaner energy? And the last also 4 or 5 months, a lot of officials of mainly European ministers, came to Qatar to ask for supply of gas. Now, before you shift from coal, you have to go to a cleaner source of energy, and gas is the way to go. But Qatar, as a country, could not substitute or fill up the market with its gas because we already have customers, we already have a climate. These are 20 years contract. Now, also when it comes to coals, I think it's a very complicated issue because this is an industry, especially in big countries, emerging countries like China, Indonesia. In order for them to, Australia is also one of the big producers, but what do you do with the workforce, the union, the labor? So it is really more complicated than what we think. This is a very long process. It will not happen soon. I think this is one. Two, we also have to put in mind the priorities in other countries. I think we have to create a common ground with less developing countries because really climate change is not a priority for poor countries. Their main issue or challenge is really securing food for their population. So we have to put in mind all these factors in order to reach a reasonable level of sustainability.
And that's an excellent point, which maybe Sheikh Ali, you can come in on. Do you think Qatar can do more to encourage ESG investing and more sustainable ways of moving forward in some of the GCC countries that are not as wealthy? And what would that look like?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think when it comes to Qatar, ESG, and especially maybe the E and the S, were enshrined in our national vision back in 2008, so before this topic kind of went into the mainstream. And what does that mean? Because whoever you ask, especially when it comes to the S and the G, which is less kind of quantifiable than what is environmentally friendly, it's relative to geography, culture sometimes, and on whatever index you would look at. But when it comes to Qatar, I think we very much focus on environmental sustainability, especially when it comes to generating an ecosystem for investment. And this is now what our investors are looking for. They are looking for environmentally sustainable ways to invest. Also, they're looking for impact investing, so investment that would lead to an impact when it comes to social and environmental development. And here, I mean, we have a lot to say. Actually, we published a paper a couple of weeks ago that actually looks into this in more detail. What are the different initiatives that are going on in Qatar, whether it's on smart cities, which offers a more sustainable way of living, towards, planting over 1 million trees. I think now we're at 600,000. And also to reducing the carbon intensity of our hydrocarbon industry. And that in itself offers many investment opportunities. Later today, as well as a bit of a sneak peek, we're signing an agreement with Green Boom, which a company that will manufacture an environmentally friendly absorbent here in Qatar. And that would significantly reduce the carbon intensity of our hydrocarbon facilities. So there are many opportunities. I think for us, we're working towards providing a platform that investors could view as being a platform for impact investing, especially when it comes to the environment, when it comes to social development.
Thank you, and love breaking news on a panel. Ali, if I can bring you in, one of the unfortunate byproducts of the focus on ESG has been accusations of greenwashing against some of the biggest companies in the world. How do you protect against that? And are regulators and agencies doing enough to define sustainable business practices?
Again, from Google perspective, actually, we look at sustainability from two perspectives. One is internal and external. Internally, that it's one of the key pillars of our vision and the way we operate. We already set a certain target by 2030 to be carbon negative. And since 2007, we have been working again on addressing carbon neutralism in order to ensure we address it. So we pay attention addressing it locally. From external perspective, we have been working closely with our customer to help them provide better services and have sustainable business using the technology we provide. And there are a number of examples that we're working with, including again, Swiss Airlines, that we have been working with them. We're helping them with our AI solution in order for them to manage, through data analytics, to manage air flights and the rest of their operation. The way we see it, we think that this plays a key role, not only in providing, supporting the environment, but also help them to have more focus on their own operation using technology to address them facing all the challenges that they're facing.
Got it. And Ali, if you can come in just on the issue of, when you are speaking to your companies, what are you telling them around how do you protect against accusations of greenwashing? What practices can you put in place? And do the regulators need to do more to define the industry?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting area. I think about sustainability is you need to create a level of trust in your communication, trust in the activities that you're taking or implementing. So, and to create that, really different players have to come in. The companies themselves need to be very open and honest about how they're performing in terms of ESG, set realistic targets, and tell the wider world if they are behind on meeting those targets or ahead, or there are other problems in it. Regulators obviously have a role to play as well, because regulators maybe set the minimum acceptable level of disclosure and transparency. So I think they play a very important role. And then actually I would look at it more from an opportunity as well. So rather than, because what we've talked about is really how to comply and how to not to do things, but how to do things better. And if you look at sustainability, by definition, it's about being relevant in the future, right? This is what sustainability is. So really looking at, for example, how we reward performance. Do we reward it on a short-term basis or a long-term basis? A lot of companies now, there's a lot of focus on quarterly reporting, which actually is probably very focused on short term, and you really need to look at long-term measures as well in terms of performance. So there are different players that will tackle the issue of honesty and transparency in the
And Oliver, you, I'm guessing, don't have to deal with quarterly reporting right now, but can you talk a little bit about how you integrate sustainability throughout the projects that you develop?
Sure. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy in the space.
Absolutely. I think we can agree. We can all agree on that.
It's very much sales and marketing, ESG, tick, next.
Yeah.
And I think this word sustainability in its essence is very wrong, because sustainability means to sustain. But if you think about what's happening today, we are using the equivalent of 5 planet Earths in terms of the consumption of natural resources that are going on right now. So if we were just to sustain, we would have to have 5 planet Earths at this current level to sustain, which just feels wrong. And the idea is to regenerate. And how do we change existing business models to be able to change the narrative? You know, as you rightly said, we incentivize profits and financial returns, but is that the right way to incentivize? And I think this is where the shift has to happen. And what does this mean? So for us, we control our entire supply chain. So unlike a traditional hospitality company, which is a brand or a management company, we design our own hotels. We manufacture our own hotels. So we control the entire supply chain, from the materials that we use to our building methodology, to sustainable building practices, and then the operational piece as well. So we're changing our business model. There may be ways that we could make money faster, but we're thinking about the long term of the planet.
Maybe we can talk about the Mondelez experience, because you all do have to deal with shareholders. How do you balance shareholder returns versus sustainability and doing more around all the ESG fronts for a company like yours?
Yeah, for us, ESG has been relevant since the formation of the company 10 years ago. We set clear targets that we delivered by 2020, and actually we passed those targets. So it's very public.
Which is rare.
It is in a Snacking Made Right report, and we decided to focus on 4 issues. One is obviously safety of our products and our colleagues. The second one is to make sure that we sustainable source our ingredients, because if I think about CO2 emission, 70% of our emission are scope 3, so outside the company. And we have program like Coco Life, which is a program that we started exactly at the beginning of the company with the aim to invest $400 million to ensure first that there will be cocoa available in the future, to improve the livelihoods of farmers. We touch more than 200,000 farmers, to avoid deforestation, and to continue to work with them to give back in 2 ways, reducing the impact on the planet and being positive on the communities we touch. So very important. In fact, now sustainability is the 4th pillar of our strategy, and we just announced this 2 months ago. I think you said well, it is a balance between short and long term, but a purpose-led sustainable company is the only one that will do well and survive for all stakeholders. So that's the way we manage.
Absolutely. And, you know, just speaking about companies are purpose-led internally, but then do you need to give them incentives to focus on ESG? And Your Excellency, maybe if we can talk a little bit about the experience in Qatar. You know, you're building the world's largest LNG refinery as part of the sustainability push. What has that been like, and do you need to give companies incentives to come in and be part of the project?
I think the process have already started in Qatar. Maybe Qatar is one of the, I could say, leading countries with the ESG, whether it's the public sector or the private sector. Our banking system, I think Sheikh Ali have talked a bit about this, have already really started. I also happen to be on the board of one of the banks here in Qatar, so I follow up closely of where we are and what we are planning in for the future. But really, for me, most important is to educate our public. I think the public have to be aware. What does ESG means? Somebody has to explain this to the public. What is the relation and concern? If we are talking about sustainability, I'll give actually a very specific examples. You know, as Muslims, we have to wash 5 times a day in preparing for the prayers. The way we did it before is we opened the tap water and a lot of waste goes on during this process. Now I think with the specific programs from the concerned ministry, they started using smart faucets. They also recirculate the water. That also is educating your own public, because what is sustainability really in the long run? Is using the little and keeping the rest for the future, because the overall picture is not positive. We're going to next week to Lisbon in Portugal to discuss a very important subject. I'm sorry I'm moving to this, but I'm just trying to put pieces together.
And in the desert, water is very important. That was actually one of my questions.
So a lot of dumping of especially plastic in rivers and in lake that goes to the oceans. Then it affects the marine life, it affects whales, it affects sea lions, it even affects some birds when they eat these. So you end up with a damage that is done directly to our environment. Now, I think if we have like a public program educating our public of how important to conserve, how important to sustain, I think that would be really the right step and the right direction. We're sitting here in a 5-star hotel talking about so important subject, but we really have to pass this to the public so they understand the importance of this subject and how to deal with it and how to follow it in order to, especially younger generation.
Absolutely. And on the water question, Oliver, I wanted to ask you, building resorts in the desert where you want to give the consumer the best experience, but you also have to conserve water, which is such a precious resource here. How do you balance those two? And what's the experience been for you?
I think, again, going back to this idea of sustainability being expensive, it's not. You just have to be resourceful. And there are a lot of new practices which we can implement that allow us to be resourceful. The construction industry, we're talking about a lot of growth that's happening. Construction industry is responsible for about 40% of the global emissions right now in the world. That's the equivalent, I think, to the city of Paris being built every 7 days. If you think about and visualize how incredible that is. So the industry has to change, and we have to change by example, not by talking. And this is where I really think that governments, this is where the entrepreneurs really need to lead. Elon, he's sending people to space, but let's focus on planet Earth, because we have one Earth.
Maybe that's why Elon made a virtual appearance, so he wouldn't get these questions.
On his private jet.
Maurizio, if I can bring you in on the Mondelez experience, what does sustainability look like? You all announced a deal this week of buying an organic snack bar maker. How do you get to, especially for a snacking company where there's so much about sugar and salt and healthy alternatives for consumers, how do you reach that place without losing your customer base?
I think we have to give consumers option. So our focus obviously is consumer well-being, but I think for all of us a piece of chocolate is a piece of chocolate. But what we do is give option. So first of all, reducing the size and making sure that there is portion control. Reducing sugar. So we launched Oreo Zero, for example, in China. Acquiring company like Who that is producing a complete vegan chocolate, or Cliff, as you just said, the leader in North America on protein bars. So that's our intention, is to make sure that everyone can enjoy snacking in the right way, and more importantly, produced in the right way. That's why the focus on sustainable ingredients, the focus on farmers, the focus on certification, and obviously the reduction of CO2, waste, water is very, very important. So, and consumers are looking into it, I agree with you. They have to know, but especially the young generation, they're making choices based on the brand, and if the brand is really behind sustainability. So that's why for us the strategy is really embedded as well in every brand, the communication, the packaging that we use, the kind of packaging that we use. So today we have 95% of our packaging that is already recyclable, and we want to go to 100% by 2025, which is obviously good. But then we have to work with government and association to make sure that people would recycle the packaging. So that's, I think, the challenge for all of us, to really work together, create one set of standards, because having different standards is not easy as well, and then continue to work to protect the planet for my kids, the kids of the kids, and the next generations.
Yes, I mean, you need governments as stakeholders, you also need investors. Ali, I'm wondering if you can give some insights. You know, we hear investors being so much more vocal about ESG now, but are they willing to give up returns in order for companies to make those transitions, which are not always cheap? What's your experience speaking to boards and CEOs?
Now, I disagree with the premise that sustainability means lower returns. In fact, if we just dig a bit deeper as to what it means for business, it means finding an opportunity on growing top line, like what you've just said, for example, changing your packaging to retain or gain new, younger, more sort of aware buyers of your product.
Clarify lower short-term returns. Long-term, the returns maybe.
Okay, so that's and that's the problem that we have, is that as long as there are people looking short-term, we will have a challenge with this question. But there are many investors today, and in fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday who were looking to raise money to launch a new business, and they struggled a lot until they chose a niche which is really to promote clean energy, and they found the investor, and it's a significant amount. I mean, I cannot say much, but it was a very exciting to see, because they've been working on this for almost 3 years, trying to launch this business. So there are investors who are looking at this. I think especially, you know, if you look in the context locally here, and we deal a lot with local clients here, attracting foreign investment, you really need to up the game on the how you perform in terms of sustainability. You attract a lot more. You cast the net a lot wider, I think.
And speaking of raising money, Sheikh Ali, if I can bring you in, you know, Qatar said last month that they're planning to issue green bonds as part of their ESG push. Can you talk a little bit about those plans and the thinking behind that?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think there is a plan to. We already, I think, launched around $600 million worth of green bonds that are out in the market. To expand that offering even across, different domestic banks, I think would be also important as part of Qatar's ESG portfolio, so to say. And also, I think a comment that Ali made was really interesting, is how can you achieve a sustainable growth for environmentally friendly kind of project without impacting alpha or your profits, right? And I think, governments here could play also a big role in incentivizing companies, helping them get to scale, go up in terms of economies of scale, and also to achieve the necessary technological advancements to make their products more cost competitive. It's something that we are doing, even as an agency, when it comes to supporting projects that that help Qatar in terms of furthering ESG. And I think, this would really, play a pivotal role as well. Because, sometimes, when you go into a project that, on its face is environmentally friendly, it could not be sustainable in the short term. So how do we solve for that? And it's a question that we're thinking very hard about.
Abdul Rahman, Google is a company that raised one of the largest green bonds in the world way before others were doing it. Is that something that you all would be looking at doing in the Middle East as well? And what has the experience been around pushing sustainability in this region for the company?
As just indicated earlier, sustainability is one of the key pillars of our vision. And what we do globally, we try to implement regionally and locally, specifically in Qatar and the rest of the area. We believe that from a technology point of view, that we can play a vital role in driving digital transformation of organization. That does not necessarily address their business challenges, but in a way it will address the sustainability. As I mentioned to you earlier, the solution we provide from an AI point of view, artificial intelligence, from our own experience, using our own data center, the efficiency of coding, for example, that would require human interaction has been reduced to almost 50%. That itself contributes to saving and addressing the sustainability. The way we see it is trying to do something good for the world while maintaining business values. And that's what we try to provide to our customer. In the region, we have already announced launching a data center in Qatar and one in Saudi later on. The key structure of our investment is based on sustainability. While we maintain carbon neutral until we achieve our objective to be carbon negative by 2030, providing renewable energy, that itself will contribute to the sustainability, will be in alignment with a country like Qatar looking into their strategy of addressing ESG. In a way, it addresses that. But that's how we look at it holistically.
And Maurizio, to this idea of can you have the same policies in all the countries, especially for companies? So how do you put in place an ESG strategy that can be applied to both developed and developing countries the same way, where stakeholders are different, and engage all the stakeholders, including the local governments, but as well as the communities that you're working in?
Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe there is not a solution perfectly working for everyone, but some of the key challenges are really across the globe. And that's why when we build our ESG strategy, we have experts that are working very much externally with association, governments to understand which are the key issues and the challenges. Then they form the strategy, we review this strategy at executive leadership team, and then the board is obviously very well involved. I think if we think about protect the environment, renewable energies, these are things that we can do everywhere. In fact, even in my region, we did a very good progress. And I don't know, just to give you some example, we moved in China, Bahrain, and Vietnam 1,400 tons of packaging from plastic to recyclable packaging, or reducing CO2 emission and water emission using renewable energy, changing the oven, because to produce biscuits we have big oven and we have to transform them and making sure that we use renewable energy. I think, coming back to your point as well, you could think there is maybe a hit short term, but technologies, and there are many companies that are doing a lot of interesting and innovative things. And for us, obviously, the size of the scope, the transformation that we can drive, and the innovation that we can bring in our processes is key, because it's helping us short and longer term. And there are many things happening. And I think probably in the last 2 years, I see a renewed effort across the globe to really tackle this challenge, which will be very important for the population and sustainability of the globe. So that's what we do. And to summarize, common themes, local execution, a lot of work and collaboration with external stakeholders, association, NGOs, because we need the help of everyone to move things on.
Absolutely. Your Excellency, I want to come back to a point you made about educating the public within the country. From a perspective of bringing in investment to Qatar, I know fiscally you all don't need it, but for technical know-how and for ensuring sustainability, do you have stricter guidelines now for companies that are coming into Qatar to invest so that you're, to your point about educating the public? And are you bringing in companies that have best practices around this?
Well, I think the importance of ESG for companies or for countries is to evaluate how advanced we are with sustainability. Sometimes, or in some sectors, I would say the private sector is faster in terms of implementation. Private sector, for example, today in Qatar, some of the banks are offering loans for to buy electric cars. This is the first time it happens. So what are we saying here is that educating, encouraging public to buy electric cars. By the way, I'm also one of the people whose my next car is going to be electric. So there is a benefit, encouragement for people to be sustainable in the long run. Now, with younger generation, I think we have to start from preschool because this will continue. Those are the leaders of the future. So if we start from an early age, we can make sure they understand what sustainability is. They will understand how to deal in their practical world in order to achieve. Now, what we say here might not be the same of what people in Sweden are saying. It's a completely different environment. It's a completely different culture. For example, Sweden wants to be the #1 country in terms of zero emission. But their environment helps. I had this discussion with one of our Swedish colleagues. I said, 98% of your country is green. It's forest. If I compare my country where it's a desert country, I mean, each tree for us has a big value. So I cannot tell you that Qatar could be the second country to have a zero emission by 2050 or 2050. I mean, we face great challenges, and this has to be put into consideration. Not only us in here, but different countries has different climate, has different challenges. So we have, as an international community, have to create a common ground and I think even in Europe, the definition of forest differs from one country to the other. So it's a different world for us. We don't know even what's the definition of forest. So to sum it up, as an international community, we have to come up with common ground in terms of how collectively, as a world community, move in the proper direction to have a sustainable world, to protect our planet for our generations.
Oliver, if I can come to you just around the point of, governments are talking a lot about making it a more sustainable future. But do you think companies, when they're putting in place sustainable practices and they're investing in new markets, need to be incentivized by governments? And what incentives would you be looking for if that were the instance?
I actually think the business model is broken because, and I agree with you, education is very, very important. But when young people come into a marketplace where they are incentivized and measured by their financial success and ROI and shareholder returns, no matter how green and sustainable you want to be, you're forced into a marketplace where to raise capital, I need to look at the best return on my capital. But that's wrong. Take the example of a country like Bhutan, which I think has a different index, an index of happiness. And I think in many ways, I know very many successful, wealthy people who are unhappy. So maybe we should shift our focus onto really what happiness is rather than just financial success. And I think that's something that we need to think about.
Happiness as part of an ESG pillar. One of the things, because the definition of ESG is changing so much right now, and each country is making their own definitions in terms of what should be included. Sheikh Ali, a little bit offbeat question, but as the only woman on the panel, I feel like I must ask it. What about including more women in the workforce? To His Excellency's point about educating people, how does that look, and is that one of the pushes for Qatar in terms of ESG?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely, I think it falls within the realm of social development. If you look at Qatar, I mean, entrance into the workforce are around 60% female. They constitute around 20 to 30% of our cabinet. So very much, I mean, we cannot run a sustainable economy while neglecting 50% of the population. And for us, I mean, this is key. So this is something that we look at. I think even when you look at Qatar on a regional context, we've been at the forefront in this issue. And it's something that investors as well look for. They ask a lot of questions about that. And I think, Qatar has really something to show in that sense.
And also, are there any more practices or more policies that you all are implementing around that now?
No, definitely. I think this is a continuous track within the social development program as part of Qatar's national vision. When it comes to the empowerment of women, when it comes to creating a more sustainable environment, and also with regards to the various different issues and challenges that we face here today. So I think this is a long-term project, and there will be continual developments in this space.
And just on the broader definition of ESG, Abdul Rahman, if I can bring you in, recently executives at Apple and Google said that they would include privacy as part of the ESG pillars, right? I mean, what is the experience for Google around that in the Middle East, and what are some of the challenges that you're seeing around it?
I think if you go since the invention of the idea of ESG, the beginning of 2000, 2004, the evolution has gone through many processes, from the government perspective until now on the private sector. Looking into that, now this has become now a key strategy of every CEO's agenda. 5 years ago, you talk anyone about sustainability or ESG, probably only the top Fortune companies are taking this into consideration. But now, and I think it goes throughout the hierarchy. And I think that would lead again to what His Excellency the Ambassador mentioned earlier on the education. I think in the next maybe 3 to 5 years, you're going to see this at the education level. From, again, Google perspective, I believe privacy is a key element of what we offer. Google is a wider organization providing solutions that give accessibility to many aspects. We apply the AI, the artificial intelligence, machine learning, enabling us to protect the privacy of people, because we believe that it's not only addressing the privacy and security point of view, but it also contribute to the efficiency of what they offer. And I'm sure the other companies like Apple and the rest probably doing the same.
Absolutely. Ali, if I can bring you in with the Middle East lens, what are some of the key challenges that you see to companies implementing their ESG strategies and even governments doing so?
The first question that you get asked is, why do I need to do it? And I think we've all asked the question, we've heard the question, I should say.
And is this listed companies or private companies more?
I think a mixture. And I'm not saying it in a negative way, but really not understanding, I think, where does this lead to? And not having a view of, what is, if I invest, and you need to invest, you have to change processes, you have to, educate your workforce, you educate your customers, your suppliers about what you need. So there's a bit of transformation to be done. So the question is, well, and going back to your point, going back to a monetary value in terms of determining whether I should proceed in this direction or not. But actually, what we see is if you spend time really understanding the implications on your business, from a risk and from an opportunity, because undoubtedly there are risks. I mean, climate is a risk to every business, and I will argue till tomorrow to explain why a climate risk is a risk to your business, whichever industry you're in. So you really need to do your part to tackle this risk and how it impacts your business. And the same thing applies to social issues, same applies to governance, transparency. So really by dealing with these, you are ensuring that your business is there tomorrow. And this is the sort of the general way of talking to our clients in terms of explaining why you need to do it. Because if you don't do it in 10 years' time, probably you won't be around. Probably. Maybe not everybody, but if you don't do anything about it, you will not be able to deal with customers. Your suppliers would have moved on. You will be irrelevant, and it's a very fast-moving space. And the reason why it is urgent is because the climate is changing, right? This is a straight line, and you can't do anything. The only thing you do about it is collectively, as a community, as a business community, deal with the issues. And everybody has to do it. I think what would help is if regulators were clear about what is the requirements, if the reporting standards converge, for example, to help companies really measure performance against each other. There's a lot of things in the framework that need to be done to encourage or speed up the process. But I can assure you, this is not going to be a choice very soon. It'll have to be done.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to, we have less than 10 minutes, to Oliver's point, which I think sums up what many of us are feeling, that the system is broken. But if we could just do a rapid fire round, and I'm going to put you first on the spotlight, Oliver, because you started this. To ensuring sustainability in a developing world, what is the one change each of you would like to see? Starting with you, Oliver.
I think change has to start from the top down and from the bottom up. So it's a collective responsibility that everybody sitting on this panel, who covers, the government through to the private sector, we need to do together. And it needs to be our mission, and it needs to be our mission now, not tomorrow, because tomorrow it's going to be too late. Including
journalists. We'll put our hands up as well. Ali, would you like to go next? One change.
Why change? I think because if you don't change, you won't be around for too long. I think
But that's not a change you'd like to see.
Sorry, I missed your question. Maybe.
What is the one key change that you think you would like to see, even in this region, toward the goal of our panel about ensuring sustainability in a developing world?
I think to have clarity around what framework we need to adopt in terms of, as a business community, what do we need to report, what targets we need to have in place.
So you're putting the onus on the.
I think so. I think the reason is, it's too urgent to wait for people to have that, light bulb moment and say, oh yeah, somebody needs to give this a kickstart, and then it'll take its own sort of momentum. But really, it needs the push.
Okay. Yeah. Your Excellency.
I think the media could play an important role.
Okay, I'll take that.
Honestly. We have to educate our public big time. The more educated they are, the better response we will have in terms of dealing with sustainability. Sometimes we use terminology that does not mean nothing to what they call laymen. They don't understand. So in order to prepare them for the future, we have to explain it to them in layman's terms of what does it mean and how to deal with it and how can you create a better future, starting with our homes. I will advise those who are around me, for example, don't use plastic, use paper bag, use this, use that. I just want to comment one thing our colleague have said. If they have this energy bar, we wish we should have tried it here, so at least we can give our opinion about it.
I will send you some.
It's a good segue to you, Mauricio.
Yes. I think for me it's more collaboration, more transparency as well. As I said, we publish every year a report called Snacking Made Right, where everything is there. So what we do, we don't do. And probably I would like to see more commitment on the goals that governments and association companies are setting for themselves. But then there is always one way or another to say, okay, we have to postpone this because of that, or there is something urgent short term. And so we have to balance short and long term.
It's interesting that you didn't mention investors there.
No, because I think investors, they understand what we are doing, and they have to as well being patient for the long term. But we said already, especially the young generation, they will be the one making the choice. And I think in some part of the world, the education in school, it's really hard on sustainability, waste reduction, water reduction. So they come with a completely different mindset. And I think, as you said, if companies will not move, there will be no business. So it's a good challenge for us.
Abdul Rahman?
I would say awareness. I think awareness is something that we need to increase awareness across the board. It's not something, sustainability is something good to have. At a certain point of time, it becomes critical to have. And I think one of my colleagues has mentioned about survivability of the business if you don't pay attention to ESG. So I think awareness, and it should go bottom top. And probably there will be another measures of what each company or government are contributing to the sustainability. If that's, again, looked at it or addressed from a governance model point of view, I think it would have a difference and it will make a change to give a better living for the world we are in.
Sheikh Ali?
I would say it needs to be clear what policymakers, regulators, and the public expect from companies when it comes to ESG, especially when you take in mind the relative context of geography and culture. And I think, here, there are many indexes. What a company would score on a G in MSCI does not account for anything on what they score on another index. So it would really take, I think, a multi-stakeholder approach to kind of come up to an understanding of what ESG means, and especially what it means to different cultures, to different geographies, and to different economies. And I think that would be the main challenge ahead.
So are you calling for more indexes, but that are country-specific, or?
No, I would say, if you go back into the past, how did people really adopt ESG? They would adopt it in terms of value or impact investing. So they would invest on the basis of their own morals and values. And this, even in Qatar, when you talk to, a good example I would maybe show is my family, right? They would only invest in Islamic-compliant projects, so things that does not have anything to do with tobacco, alcohol, usury, and so on. So now when that comes into the mainstream, the issue is what is the understanding that people have of ESG? What are the values that, on a global basis, people would share? And I think this is, the differences here are going to remain, and that would be a challenge going to the future.
Got it. Well, and I think my takeaway from this is that I need to write more clear stories that the young people can understand. So I will try to do that. Thank you all so much for a very interesting panel, and thank you to our audience for listening. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Qatar Summit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.